On my first channel update video, when I asked for suggestions, someone wanted me to do film reviews. I kind of did this in my video on Un Chien Andalou, but that wasn't really an analysis or explanation, just a silly summary. So I thought I would make my first real film review. Well, I don't really know if it's a review exactly, but it's an overview, I guess. Whatever it is, let's get started with it. For my first film review video, I chose a very famous one, which you already know the name of from the title of this video, Charlie Chaplin's 1921 film, The Kid. There are a few reasons why I chose this one over all others. First of all, it's really famous and for good reason. The second reason is that it was the film that really got me into silent films when I was still a teenager. It wasn't the first silent film I had watched, but it made me realize that silent films were a legitimate form of media, and should be appreciated even in the modern world. And the third reason is kind of related to that. I think it's a great beginner movie for anyone wanting to get into silent films or old films in general. But anyway, let's first go through the background of the film. Charlie Chaplin had skyrocketed to fame by the mid-1910s, mostly just making the slapstick comedy shorts he's most known for among the general public. But he had started to become more creatively involved in most of his films, first taking over as writer and director, then assuming the role as producer too, and by 1918 was even composing the film scores. And The Kid in 1921 was his most ambitious project yet. In the opening scenes of The Kid, we see a mother and a newborn baby, whose husband, or possibly boyfriend, is not interested in the woman anymore. She can't bear raising the child on her own, especially because of how scandalous being a single mother would have been at that time. The woman decides to leave the baby in a parked car for someone else to find and raise, thinking it might give the child an opportunity of living a better life than with her. She also places a handwritten note with it. Aside from those first few scenes, roughly the first half of the film is Chaplin's standard brand of clever slapstick for the most part. In character as his immortal tramp character, he finds the aforementioned baby, tries to get rid of it in the funniest ways possible, but eventually gives up and accepts it and raises it as his own after seeing the mother's note. Despite trying to ditch the baby at first, he grows fond of the boy, played by Jackie Coogan, and they work together in money-making schemes by tricking people. Their scams are so lighthearted and fun that we, as the audience, don't really care that they're illegal activities. And even if we did, after seeing how they live in a tiny apartment in squalor, but make the best of it with each other's company, any reservations we might have had disappear. The tramp and the kid, by complete chance, run into the mother we saw at the beginning of the film. Of course, none of them know how their fates are connected, and that the little boy is actually her child. The tone of the film shifts to a more sentimental one, and we root for the mother to recognize her baby somehow, but she doesn't. Actually, the mother has become a famous actress since we last saw her, and spends some of her free time helping poor children, possibly to make up for the mistake that she now regrets making. That's the only reason she's in the tramp's neighborhood. She still feels guilty about abandoning her child years ago, and even interacts with the kid, completely unaware that he is actually her son, adding to the pathos of the scene. But one day, shortly after getting into a fight with another boy, the kid becomes sick, and his real mother tells the tramp to call a doctor for the boy. While examining him, the tramp lets it slip that he's not the actual father of the kid, and shows the doctor the note the mother had left when she abandoned him. The doctor, seeing the tiny, dirty apartment the two of them live in, says he will find a way to fix the situation, then leaves on that ambiguous note. After a few days of rest, the kid is feeling much better, but then we see an orphanage truck stop by the entrance of the tramp's apartment. In the emotional climax of the film, the men from the orphanage try to take the kid by force when the tramp refuses to give him up. Here, Chaplin uses slapstick techniques, though they don't have the same effect as they normally would. We are too emotionally invested in these characters to be able to laugh so loudly at their plight. Despite the tramp's best efforts, the kid is taken away and screams in anguish at being separated from his adopted father, who he thinks is just his real father. Even though it's a silent film, we can hear his cries as if he were right next to us. The truck drives away, but the tramp isn't finished yet. He climbs to the roof of the building and begins chasing the truck, fighting off a pursuing policeman in the process. He's finally able to cut off the vehicle by racing across the rooftops and jumps into the bed of the truck and fights off the orphanage officer supervising the kid during the drive. And the father and son are reunited in a tearful embrace. And here, as a sort of comic relief, we see a perfectly timed piece of comedy as Chaplin chases off the driver of the truck before setting off with his son. Meanwhile, the kid's real mother visits the tramp's residence and happens to see the flustered doctor there. The doctor shows her the note the tramp had given him when explaining that he wasn't the boy's real father, the same note she herself had written. So now she knows exactly who her baby is. But now she doesn't know where he is. Of course, the tramp can't return home, so instead he takes the kid to a cheap boarding house to sleep for the night. To avoid having to pay extra for another bed for the kid, he pays for one and sneaks the boy in through a window. We watch their humorous antics as they try to hide the fact that the kid is there, but eventually they're caught and the tramp has to pay up. This whole scene in the poorhouse shows that Chaplin isn't yet finished with comedy in this film, and that he hasn't completely sacrificed laughs for tears. But then the owner of the boarding house sees in a newspaper that there is a reward for the return of the kid, who he recognizes from a detailed description. The owner snatches up the boy in the middle of the night, sending the tramp into a panic when he wakes up and sees that he's gone. The kid is now in police custody and is soon met by his real mother, the actress, who presumably put up the cash reward. Naturally, the boy is apprehensive towards her. Meanwhile, the tramp has searched everywhere with no luck. He sits down, exhausted, and falls asleep. If there is one criticism that I have about this film, it's this next sequence. It's crazy and surreal and seems to have no connection with the main story. Maybe it's just me, but let me know what you think about this scene in the comments. Here's some fun or possibly disturbing little trivia about this scene. We can see Chaplin's future second wife as an angel flirting and teasing the tramp. But you might be interested to know that she was only 12 years old when this was filmed. She married Chaplin 4 years later. Yes, you did the math correctly. She was 16 then. But I digress. A policeman wakes the tramp up from his strange dream and takes him away. But instead of taking him downtown, he takes him to the kid's mother's house, where he is happily reunited with the boy he had dutifully raised as his own son, and he goes inside. What happens next is left to us. Perhaps he gets married to the actress and eventually is able to adopt the kid officially. Perhaps he has permanent visiting rights and returns to his tiny abode in the slums, but we don't know for sure. So what makes this movie so great? Well, I think it's important to understand that at that time, genres were generally stuck to pretty rigidly. A film was either a comedy or a drama, not both. Of course, some comedy films had brief moments of sadness due to romantic rejection and things like that, but nothing too heart-wrenching. So the kid was actually pretty innovative in this way. So we have Chaplin up to his usual tricks in comedy, but mixed with his keen sense of realistic drama that moved so many in the audience to tears. And it's likely that if they hadn't read about the film, they would have been surprised at this turn of events. Other drama films at this time were usually over-dramatic and theatrical. Chaplin was one of the first to take full advantage of a more realistic acting approach, especially when it came to the really emotional parts. So essentially, Chaplin, known for being an on-screen clown, showed his audience and film critics alike what he could really do. He proved that he was a master of both comedy and drama. This was really the beginning of Chaplin's lasting legacy of a master filmmaker of the highest caliber, as well as the beginning of a new era of more nuanced filmmaking. And it really represents the maturation of silent film as an art form. It just so happened that this one was also meant for a popular audience. Another thing that I personally want to mention is Jackie Coogan. In my opinion, Jackie Coogan's performance was what really propelled this film to popularity. Even now, child actors are often not yet skilled enough to act a role with natural ease and realism. The same was true then too, but because of the theatrical nature of dramas at that time, it was generally accepted. The way Coogan plays the role of the kid is so modern to me, and he was only about 5 years old when it was filmed. Take the climactic scene for example. He's not just crying, he's really expressing the anguish with his face, which really roots us in the realism of the moment. Jackie Coogan's acting career was launched by the kid, and soon became about as much of a household name as Chaplin himself. While his impressive acting ability was treated as a novelty by many, it really was rare, then and now, for a child actor to act so well, in my opinion. Like Chaplin, Jackie Coogan proved he could skillfully do comedy as well as drama. In short, The Kid has a well-deserved reputation among fans of old films, film historians, and film critics, as one of the best of the 1920s, and the silent era in general. It helped propel the international movement of making films that were serious works of art that could also be enjoyed by average people. And like I said at the beginning, it was the film that really got me interested in the silent era, so it holds a special place for me, and I'm sure it does to others as well. I hope you enjoyed my first film review / analysis / appreciation video, so please let me know what you thought about it. I definitely want to do more of them in the future, so what 1920s film do you think I should do next? Let me know in the comments. Well, that's all for now all you sheiks and gals out there, but stay tuned for more tales from the Jazz Age.